I am so excited. I get to talk about my favorite books of 2021. Yes. Hello. My name is Nakia. Welcome to my channel. Yes, I couldn't do this video last year because I was brand new to BookTube, brand new to getting back into reading, so I hadn't read that much, but I can do it this year. Yes. So, like I said, let's talk about my favorite books that I read in 2021. Yes. Now, this is my top 10, and I'm going to go in order. But this was very difficult because every book on this list is a 4 or 5 star book for me. So I had a hard time narrowing it down. What I did was books that I had like a little issue with, that maybe it was a 4.5, not a 5. Those are lower on the list. And the ones that I put as perfection are at the top. So let's just go. Let's just do it. First up, we have Recursion by Blake Crouch. Now, I just read this book and I loved it. As I said, every book on this list, I love. This one, well, let's just start with the synopsis, shall we? This book is about a detective named Barry and a neuroscientist named Helena. Now, there is a thing in this world called false memory syndrome, and it's basically what it sounds like. It gives you memories of a life you did not have, and it is causing chaos in this world because who wants to have this life that you think you had not be real? Like a husband you thought you had, a child you thought you had, a job you thought you had, and all of a sudden you're in your reality and none of that was real. So the detective is looking into a case that leads him deeper into what's going on with this false memory syndrome. The neuroscientist Helena, her mom is suffering from Alzheimer's, so she's trying to find a cure, which also gets her entwined in this business. And the two end up coming together to try to figure out what's going on with this false memory syndrome and help the world. Now, I left it very vague because I don't want to spoil things, but I said in my November wrap up that this is my kind of book. I guess am geek at heart because I love this kind of story that deals with time travel and alternate realities and all of that kind of stuff. I just loved it. I just loved how it made me think and all of that. My only qualms with this book would be that in the very beginning, when we switched to Helena's perspective, I just wasn't really as into her story. I was still reading it, but it just brought the book down for me. I preferred Barry's story because, I'd rather follow a detective while he's investigating a situation. And it just was making it a little bit slow, but I was still into it, but I just kind of wanted to skip past her stuff. But then when we got to like the 100-page mark, things took off and it was a page turner from there. And as I said, I loved every minute of it. So I can't wait to read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I know a lot of you prefer that book over this one, but I already love this one, so it can only go up from here. And as I said, I'm looking forward to it. Loved it. Next up, we have a debut novel by an author who I am happy to keep my eye on, and I am speaking of Nightmare by Chad Nicholas. Now, this book I heard about in the horror booktube community. It was going around. Everybody was talking about how great it was. And so I was like, let me see what this is about. Let me see for myself. And this is my kind of story. It is a psychological horror, which is right up my alley. Clearly, like I said, I like things that make you think, a little more cerebral. But let me just tell you what it's about. I'll just read you a little bit of what it says because this is one, like I said, because it's psychological, it's hard to describe without giving anything away. Had it come back? No, it couldn't have. He had buried it for good, or at least that's what Scott told himself. But what if it had? Was that why the scarecrow now watched him? But the more Scott tries to ignore it, the more the evidence begins to pile up. So do the bodies, because sometimes the dead don't stay buried. Sometimes the monster survives. So this is one of those stories where you don't know if we have an unreliable narrator because things are going on that are weird, like pictures get moved, people that he thought were there or around are not anymore. And it's like, what is going on with this guy? Is he losing it or what? And I said this when I read this book, this is my kind of horror. As I said, I love a book where you don't know who you can trust. There was body horror and a little bit of gore, but it was not too much, just right for me. No trigger warnings that I don't like, no sexual assault, no pedophilia, no incest, all of that. And I enjoyed the ending as well. It was one of those things where I had to go back and reread something. which I like. I love, like, if I watch a horror movie and I'm like, I need to watch that again so I could catch some stuff. That's how this one is. You will have to reread it to go back and catch things that you now know from knowing what happens at the end. So like I said, I loved this book. The only reason it's lower on the list is because in the very beginning, it was just a little bit too descriptive, where it was just unnecessary descriptions, where it, like I said, took a little bit for me to get into, but that was like the first chapter. After that, I was intrigued though from the beginning. But after that, as far as the writing, it was smooth sailing. I think I gave this 4.5 stars. I don't even remember. I did a live discussion with Chad Nicholas and Steve from Steve Talks Books and stuff. I enjoyed my conversation with him. I think I even raised my rating after talking to him because he discussed things that I just gave me more of an appreciation for the book and for him. So I will link that below if you want to go check it out. I'll also put it here in the cards. But yeah, so that's number 8 on my list, Nightmare by Chad Nicholas. Next up, we have a novella by an author who I also love and have my eye on and I'm in touch with, and I'm one of his ARC readers. But anyway, I am speaking of Petrified Women by Jeremy Ray. He is such a talented author. You should check him out. I have 2 of his books on this list, so you know he's special. But for this one, I will say I was very hesitant about reading this book because he had contacted me to see if I was interested, and he mentioned that there was a trigger warning for sexual assault. I was like, that's one of those content warnings that I try to avoid if I can, so I'm gonna pass. And then I just kept seeing people talk about how great the book was, but I was just like, I just can't do it. And then a booktuber posted a review on Instagram, and she said that she appreciated the author giving the trigger warning for the sexual assault, but she said it happened off the page. That was what I needed to hear. Sometimes you need people to give you a little bit more to help you out. And I was like, thank you. Now I feel a little more comfortable going to check it out. And I'm so glad I did. Clearly, it is number 7 on my list. But let me tell you what it's about. Petrified Women is a story about a couple, Harley and Aiden. They just start dating, and Aiden tells her that he likes to play pranks on people. And he's like, if you're going to be with me, it's something you got to deal with. She was just kind of like, okay, sure. And he says, have you heard of the show Scared Straight? And she's like, yeah, sure. She hadn't heard of it. She was lying. She should have known better, because his pranks are the kind that are cruel, not necessarily funny, especially not things you want to do to your girlfriend. I won't spoil any of them. I just thought of one in particular. But yeah, you'll have to read it to find out. But the way this story is set up, from the very beginning, there's just this mystery that Jeremy Ray sets up of what is going on, because Harley decides that she is going to play a prank on Aiden to get him back for all the things he's done to her. So that's where we start off in the story. And she's like getting close to his apartment, and like we get little descriptions of things that she has with her for this prank. And you're like, what is this prank? What is going to happen? Then you also don't know what kind of pranks he's played on her. So as she's getting closer to his place, we're also learning about pranks he's played on her along the way of their relationship. And it's just like so much that just keeps you flipping the page, or for me, flipping the page on my Kindle. And like I said, I could not put this book down. And then the horror does kick in. And I will say there were parts that were creepy for me. Aiden is an artist, and he carves these wood figurines, these women. And that is where the creepiness comes in again. I don't want to give too much away. There is body horror, not too much. And like I said, I just really enjoyed it. As I already said, page turner. The only reason it's lower on the list is because when it got to like more of the action part of the story, it got a little bit confusing as to what was going on. But other than that, I loved it. Loved every minute of it. As I said, I have 2 books by Jeremy Ray on this list, so he is an author I will always be here for and keep my eye on. Let's move on. It is only fitting that my next one is also by Jeremy Ray that I just said was coming, and I'm speaking of The Houseplant. Now, this is another one, short little novella. I mean, this is short, it's like 40 pages. At least it is in my Kindle. This is another one that I heard so many people talk about and give it 5 stars. And I was just kind of like, okay. And then I also heard people say that it was heartwarming and sad. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do heartwarming and sad. That's not really my thing, my judge. But I just kept hearing people talk about it. And then I saw a review by my booktube buddy, Emily, who's here on YouTube. I will link her below. And I was like, you know what? I'm finally going to read this book. And I think it just also happened to fit in a month where I was trying to throw in some extra books. I was looking for something short. And so I picked this one up, and I'm so glad I did. This one I talked about in my Moody Reader book tag video because it answered the question, have you had a book that made you cry? That was this one. But before I get there, let me tell you what it's about. It is about a plant fern named George, and he's at this nursery called the Garden Center, I believe, and he gets picked up by this woman named Brenda who takes him home. He is not happy about it because he wanted to stay at the nursery, but you know, things happen. He ends up having an appreciation for Brenda, and then something terrible happens in the family. It's Brenda, her husband, and her 2 kids, and it is what happens to George the fern after that. Now, if you don't know, I am a plant mom. I have about 6 plants. I want more, but we're taking it easy for now. And I love my baby, so I really had a special connection to this story. And let me just say, it is more than a story about a plant. It says in the synopsis it's a story about grief, and that is true. And as I said, this story made me cry. I was like trying to hold it in, crying, and then I would get it together and read some more and then cry some more. And then I finished and I went to go talk to my daughter and I couldn't even get the words out. I had to get myself together. She's laughing at me right now. She was like, you're a mess. And I was like, I know, it was just so special. Yeah, it did all that. I have not had a book that has done that for me. So of course, 5 stars. It was just perfect. I had no complaints. It was so well written. I just put it lower on the list because again, this one was so hard for me to narrow down, and I have other ones that were just more enjoyable for me because I don't really want to go to the sad grief place all the time. I will reread that story, but you know, when I'm in the mood. But otherwise, like I said, I highly recommend it if you have not read it. Such a great book. Next up, we have another novella. I just enjoyed a bunch of novellas this year. This one is a horror novella, a short story collection, and I'm speaking of Nocturne by H.B. Diaz. This one I saw on Steve's channel. Steve talks books and stuff, and he said it was one of his favorite horror books of the year. And since I knew it was short, I threw it in my little list of, you know, I'll get to it when I get to it. And in the month of November, I believe, maybe October, I'll put it up here, I was looking for another short book to help me get out of some kind of slump I was in, and I picked this one up and I loved it. As I said, it's a short story collection. These are more gothic, and just I love the writing. I can't really say too much because I don't want to give too much away. If you want to know, I talked about my favorite stories in my wrap-up video. I will put it up here. But yeah, I just enjoyed each and every story. I think it was only one that I wasn't crazy about, which is the only reason why it's a little lower on this list, but it gave me the comfy, cozy vibes. It was some body horror in it that was gross. It was stuff that was creepy. To me, it was like an adult scary stories to tell in the dark, which if you don't know, that is one of my favorite books. I will be rereading this many times because like I said, it's so short and I can just always pick it up and read a story whenever the mood hits me. I will be looking to see what else this author does next. I hope she does a longer gothic horror story or even another collection, whatever. I'm here for it. Loved it. Highly recommend it. All right. Next up. By the way, this is some elderberry tea, you know, keep the immune system right. Anyway, next up, we have an author that if you've been following my channel, you already knew was going to be on this list. I have 2 books by him, so you already know. I'm sure it's no surprise. The Passengers by John Marrs. John Marrs is one of my new favorite authors, so of course, you already knew it was coming. This one is about a world where self-driving cars are becoming the law. The story takes place in the UK, but again, this is an alternate reality, so not based in real life, but I don't know the way we're going. Anyway, so there seems to be someone or someones out there who are not fans of these self-driving cars because we have, I think, about 6 people who get into these self-driving cars and the doors lock. A voice comes in over the speaker and says, you are going to die by the end of this day. Then we also find out that these people are being broadcast for the world to see, and the world has to weigh in and vote because one person can be saved and they have to decide who that is based on things they find out throughout the course of these hours or day. I don't fully remember. This book was such a page turner, action-packed, but also just deep. Once again, makes you think. That's my kind of thing. I mean, morality, you know, when you have to decide someone's fate based off of things they've done, can you forgive? Should you forgive? Secrets are revealed. It's just so much in this book. And then there's also a little bit with some politics that comes into it towards the end. We're following a main character I enjoyed her. She's the kind of woman I like to read in a book. She's smart, makes smart decisions, got a good head on her shoulder. That's what I'm talking about. I loved it. The only reason I put this a little bit lower than my other book on this list is because it is very dark, and it's the kind of book like I will reread it, but again, like The Houseplant, I gotta be in the right mind frame. But again, I love it. I put this up there with Recursion as far as those kind of stories that I love. I hope to read something more like this in 2022. I plan to read his book, The Minders. I've heard it's not as good as the other ones, but I'm still going to read it because I love me some John Mars, and I hope he's working on something else next. But let's move on. Okay, next up, we have another novella. This one is a sci-fi novella, and I read this in January for the New Year Readathon Book Challenge, and I am so glad I did. I had heard about this one on my Booktube buddy Tori's channel, Tori Morrow, and I was intrigued, had it on my list, so glad I read it. Let me just tell you a little bit what it's about. It is about a woman named Binti who gets accepted into UMSA University. It says it's one of the finest universities in the galaxy. She is torn between leaving her family in their village, but she decides she cannot pass up this opportunity. So she leaves. They don't even know she's going, and she gets on a spaceship, to take her to UMSA University. Now, you know, that was already enough for me. I have said I put this in the horror/sci-fi category. It is only categorized as sci-fi, but when she's on this ship, something happens that I was not expecting. The ish hits the fan, and from that point on, I could not put this book down. I read this in one sitting. It's about 90 pages. I could not put it down. I just had to know what was coming next. Aliens are involved. There is some body horror. It is tense. Like I was just like holding my breath at points. Nnedi Okorafor's writing was so good. I enjoyed it so much. I read book 2. Book 3 I did not enjoy as much. I just talked about that in my November wrap up. But this one I loved. Will always be one of my all-time favorites, and I will reread it sometime in the future. But yes, loved it. We're in the top 3. You probably already know if you've been following my channel for a while, because I've ranted and raved about all of these books, I believe. Maybe the next one, not as much, but the top 2 you already know. But let's get into number 3, Finley Donovan by Elle Cosimano. Now, this one I saw Gabby Reeds talk about, and the way she described it, I was like, I got to read this book. Now, I would have never have picked it up by the cover. You see it. I don't know why that's the cover design, but because it ended up taking place in the fall, it was a little more comfy, cozy than I thought. But let me just tell you what it's about. It is about an author named Finley Donovan who is recently separated from her husband. They're going through a custody battle. He has a new floozy in his life. And she does not want her kids raised by this woman because they're trying to get full custody of her kids. She's struggling because now she's a single mom. She's trying to work on this book. So she goes to have a meeting with her agent, and she's discussing the plot of her new book. Little does she know, there is a woman at a table nearby who overhears her talking about this plot to this murder mystery book. And she thinks this woman is a hired assassin. And so the meeting ends with her agent. This woman walks by her, slips her a note, leaves the restaurant. And the note basically says, I will offer you whatever amount of money to kill my husband. She's like, what the? But again, she's broke. So what can she do? Now, I will say, clearly things happen because this is not a novella. She does get involved with this woman and things, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I so enjoyed this book. It took me by surprise because it's comedy mixed with mystery, murder, thriller, all of that. And like I said, I just loved it. I love Finley Donovan, the character. I love the way it was written. There was a little bit of romance in here, which is the only reason why this was knocked a little bit further down, but it's just funny. In my top 3, 2 of these books, can we count? 2 of these books include romance. So, what does that say about me? I don't mind a little sprinkling, but I need some other dark stuff in there too. Don't start recommending me romance books. Don't do that. But for this one, I didn't enjoy the romance as much, but I got over it. And like I said, I loved this book. She is writing a second one, and I can't wait. Coming out next year. You already know. Sneak preview is going to be on my 2022 anticipated books. Anyway, let's move on. Okay. You should know what's coming because I know I have talked about this book ad nauseum, so I'm sorry. But The One by John Mars. This was my all-time favorite book until I read the #1 book that's on this list. I bet you can't guess. But let me tell you what it's about. This book is about a world. Clearly, he writes more sci-fi thriller type of things. In this world, there is a DNA test that you can take that tells you who your soulmate is. This is in stone, who you're meant to be with. In this reality, everyone who gets with this person that they're matched with from this DNA test is their soulmate. So you got people who are in relationships that don't know if they're meant to be together. Should they take the test to see if they're actually meant to be together? And if not, do they go their separate ways and go find the person they are matched with? It's a lot of stuff. Then you get into the people who are single. What if you're matched with someone that you don't necessarily want? Like, what if you're in your 30s and you're matched with somebody who's like 70, 80? What if you're straight and you're matched with someone of the same gender? What do you do then? There's a lot of things. I don't want to get into them, but this book is multiple POVs. We go in between many different stories that involve some of these situations I have brought up. We also are following the woman who came up with this DNA test and what's going on with her. She also takes the test, and it is very interesting who she's matched with. Oh, I just loved this book. It was just damn near perfect for me. I think I said at the very end, I didn't necessarily love the way it was wrapped up. I think left me hanging a little bit. But other than that, this book was just, like I said, perfection. I did not watch the Netflix show because when I saw the trailer, I was like, that's not the one. That's not the one. And I've already heard people say it wasn't good. You don't need to tell me. I'm not going to watch it. But this book was everything. And as you already see, 2 books on this list by John Mars. Like I said, I love him. One of my favorite authors. So let's move on to #1. What could it be? All right, we are fighting daylight. Oh, you know, these winter months, it gets dark so damn early. And then I'm also in a spot where I barely get light in my apartment now in the first place. So I have to start recording earlier. But anyway, let's just get this one in. My #1 book is, drum roll please, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This book took me by surprise. I heard people say that this was like one of their favorite books of the year, and I was like, okay, but I read The Martian, so I don't think it's gonna be my favorite. I love this book. Now, I did listen to this one through audiobook because when it comes to this kind of book with a lot of the science stuff, I just have a hard time grasping it, reading the physical book. So I listened to the audiobook. I loved the audiobook narrator, loved him. But let me just tell you a little bit what it's about. It is about a man named Ryland Grace, who is a scientist. He wakes up on a spaceship with no memory of anything. He doesn't know who he is, why he's on this ship, what is going on. Turns out that he is on a mission to save Earth. And I won't get into too many details because I don't want to give too many things away. It had the mystery of him trying to figure out what was going on and why he's there. And then also the suspense of him trying to help save Earth. Then what makes this book #1 for me is that this is a story of friendship. And I won't tell you who the friends are, but of course it involves the main character. He makes a friend and it just touched my soul. I loved these two. As soon as I finished reading it, I went to go look up things, drawings that people had done and artwork. And I mean, I've said this before, if there's any swag out there with this secondary character on it, I want it, I need it. I can't wait to see the movie to see what they do with it. I hope they don't mess it up because I'm really going to be critical. But like I said, the friendship in this story, I just loved it. I was sad. I got teary-eyed. I cheered. I laughed a lot. Of course, it's Andy Weir. It has his Andy Weir humor, but I preferred the humor in this one to The Martian. Oh, I loved the ending. At the end, I was like, oh, I just loved it. Loved it. I will listen to the audiobook many, many times in the future, I'm sure, because like I said, it was just so much fun to listen to. I would listen to it every time I would get in the car, and it was like just so, like I said, I just loved it. I don't know what else to say. Favorite book of the year, you know I voted for in the Goodreads Choice Awards. I'm so glad it won, as I knew it would. So yeah, there you have it. All right, so we did it. We did it. Happy holidays, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know in the comments if you also loved any of these books in my top 10, or if you didn't like them, you can let me know that too, but be careful. Watch it. No. And yeah, if you don't have a comment, you can leave me a spaceship, alien, some kind of emoji for my #1 book of the year, Project Hail Mary. And I think that is all we have. I am looking forward to all of my reads in 2022. You know, now that I know a little bit more about myself, I learned through this full year of reading, you know, hopefully we'll have good reads in 2022, but we'll see. And as always, there's lots of things down in the description box below, ways you can support my channel. You can donate to me on Ko-fi. Link is always below. I use the donations to buy ebooks, coffee, tea, all that good stuff. And I also usually link to the books that I talk about. So that is all. I think that's enough. So until next time, snuggle up in your hideaway with a good book like the ones on this list. Unplug as much as possible, especially from the news. Be kind to all kind, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.